Billions of dollars meant for your veterans' benefits could literally disappear into the U.S. Treasury by the end of the year, and, well, most veterans don't even realize it's happening.
Yeah, it really is a staggering amount of money. We are talking about anywhere from $19 billion to $58 billion effectively evaporating from the VA budget.
Which is just a massive number.
Right. And it's not because of some malicious funding cut, It's actually because of a bureaucratic loophole tied to medical modernization. And the window to secure those funds is closing incredibly fast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Veterans Briefing. Today, we have a really vital mission. We're doing a deep dive into a massive stack of research centered entirely on the Take Care of America's Veterans Act.
And just to give you an idea of the sheer scope here, this is a proposed legislative package that runs nearly 600 pages long.
Yeah, it's huge.
It absorbs over 60 different bills into one unified effort. But at its core, this entire package is basically a rescue mission for those disappearing billions we just mentioned.
Right. It's comprehensive, to say the least. So what you're going to learn today is how upcoming VA rating changes for incredibly common conditions, specifically sleep apnea and tinnitus, are the actual catalyst for this budget crisis.
Exactly. And we're going to unpack exactly how this new act, which, by the way, is backed by 23 major veteran service organizations, plans to legally ring-fence that money.
Because if this passes, those captured billions don't just sit in a vault somewhere. They are going to fund a radical overhaul of veteran care.
Yeah, from fixing a broken claims process to finally delivering some life-changing survivor benefits.
So to understand the solution, we first have to understand the threat. Let's look at the VA's proposed rule changes to their rating schedules.
Right. The VA is in the final stages of modernizing how they evaluate disabilities. They've already updated 11 body systems, and now they're tackling the final 4.
And as part of this, they've proposed eliminating tinnitus, that constant ringing in the ears, as a standalone compensable condition.
Which I know is going to sound really alarming to anyone currently dealing with it.
Well, absolutely. But, from a purely medical perspective, I do understand the rationale. Modern audiology generally views tinnitus as a symptom of underlying hearing loss, right? Or acoustic trauma.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than a completely isolated disease.
Right.
So the VA is just trying to align its legal definitions with current medical science.
The goal is medical accuracy. And you see a similar logic in their proposed changes to sleep apnea, don't you?
You do, yeah. They are tightening the criteria to make it much harder to get a high compensable rating if your condition is deemed adequately treated.
Adequately treated. Okay, so what does that actually look like for a veteran?
Well, so if you are prescribed a CPAP machine, right, and it successfully opens your airway and resolves the acute symptoms of the apnea, the new schedule would reflect that improved medical state.
Which likely results in a 0% compensable rating.
So we just have to face the reality that these schedules are being updated because they were built on outdated medical criteria. It's like the recent updates we saw for GE or D where they shifted to objective diagnostic criteria. The modernization is just happening.
Right, it's inevitable. But here's the critical pivot. By updating these schedules and lowering the average ratings for these incredibly common claims, the VA isn't just changing medical definitions.
No, they're generating massive financial savings.
A historic amount of savings, honestly. Estimates show these specific changes will result in savings between $19 billion and $58 billion over the next decade.
And everybody agrees that the VA needs accurate, medically sound rating schedules. But the multi-billion-dollar question is, well, what happens to that money?
Yeah, because under current federal law, if that money isn't explicitly earmarked to stay within the Department of Veterans Affairs, it doesn't just get saved for future veteran programs.
Right.
It simply bleeds back into the general fund of the U.S. Treasury. And let me stop you right there, because the mechanics of government budgeting can be, incredibly dense. And I want to make sure we are visualizing this correctly.
Go for it.
It's not like a household budget. If you save $100 on your electric bill, you can just slide it over to your grocery budget, right? But in the federal government, an unearmarked surplus is essentially tossed into a shark tank.
That is a very accurate way to look at it.
Yeah, every single congressional representative with a pet project or, a bridge in their home district or a defense contract they want to fund, they are circling that money. If you don't put a cage around those savings immediately, the sharks just devour it.
The general fund is an absolute feeding frenzy. Once those VA rule changes take effect and the savings materialize on paper, if there isn't a statutory mechanism already in place to capture those funds, they are gone.
Gone.
Reallocated to fund causes that have absolutely nothing to do with veterans.
But wait, why does a massive piece of legislation like the Take Care of America's Veterans Act have to identify these funds up front? Like, why couldn't lawmakers just let the savings happen and then next year go to the Treasury and say, hey, you know that $5 billion we saved you on sleep apnea claims? We'd like to withdraw that now to build a new VA hospital.
Because the Treasury just doesn't keep receipts like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Anyone who has ever managed a government budget knows you cannot retroactively claim savings. You can't look backward and point to a policy change from 2 years ago to fund a program today.
Because the money has already been spent somewhere else.
Exactly. You have to legally identify the projected savings and earmark them before the policy change even goes into effect.
And that really brings us to the genius of this legislation. The Take Care of America's Veterans Act effectively says, look, we know these rating changes are inevitable. We know you are about to save tens of billions of dollars.
Right.
So we're going to legally mandate that every single cent of those savings stays inside the VA, and we're going to use it to fund this 60 bill package.
And it's crucial to understand the political weight behind this, too. This isn't just one rogue senator's idea.
No, not at all.
This is spearheaded by the American Legion and backed by 22 other major VSOs. The Wounded Warrior Project, the Military Officers Association of America, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation.
Getting 23 organizations to agree on the exact wording of a 600-page bill is practically a miracle in itself.
It really is. It's a coalition of support that you rarely ever see in Washington. And they're united because they understand the existential stakes. They know if they don't capture this money right now, it's a missed opportunity that will negatively impact veteran care for a generation.
If you're finding these discussions helpful, please subscribe to Veterans Briefing so you never miss important updates and practical information for veterans and their families.
Now let's transition from the funding mechanism to the actual human impact here. What exactly do those captured billions pay for?
Right. Let's get into the details.
A massive portion of this legislation is directed toward the invisible wounds of war, starting with a highly targeted $5 million grant specifically for mild traumatic brain injury, or TBI, research.
And we really need to emphasize the word mild here, because that is where the systemic friction lies.
Yeah.
A severe TBI from a direct vehicle crash or a gunshot wound, that is obvious on an MRI. But mild TBI, particularly from blast over pressure, is notoriously difficult to claim.
Extremely difficult.
We are talking about the invisible kinetic shock wave from firing heavy artillery, breaching doors, or being near an IED. That wave passes right through the skull and creates microscopic tears in the brain tissue.
Right, it rattles the brain, but it doesn't leave a clean, visible scar on standard imaging.
Exactly. And because the evidence is often invisible to standard diagnostic tools, veterans suffering from severe cognitive decline, memory loss, or migraines, they are having their claims denied for lack of clinical proof.
And that's why this is so huge. By funding this specific research and creating a joint VA and DoD task force on blast overpressure, this legislation is attempting to build the hard, scientific baseline needed to prove how prevalent these microtraumas are.
Which is the key that could unlock thousands of future claims.
Yes. Claims that are currently trapped behind a lack of evidence. It's about laying the scientific groundwork today so a veteran 10 years from now doesn't have to fight an uphill battle.
And keeping with that theme of mental health, I see provisions here that take a very grassroots approach to suicide and overdose prevention.
Yeah, the bill extends the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program for another 3 years.
Which is such an effective program.
It really is. What makes the Fox grant so effective is that it bypasses the sterile clinical VA hospital setting and provides crucial funding directly to community-based organizations.
Right. It empowers local groups who actually know the veteran, who interact with them daily, to intervene.
Exactly. And the bill also includes this innovative 1-year pilot program providing free opioid overdose rescue medications like naloxone to high-risk veterans, completely waiving all copays.
A very practical, boots-on-the-ground approach to saving lives. Now, I want to move from the invisible wounds to physical injuries, because there is a provision in this act that addresses a bureaucratic injustice that frankly defies all logic.
Oh, the offset penalty.
Yes. I'm talking about the offset penalty for combat retirees, which is addressed here by the inclusion of the Major Richard Starr Act. Can you break down the mechanics of this offset for us?
Yeah, so under current federal law, many Chapter 61 combat retirees, and these are service members who were medically retired before reaching 20 years of service due to combat-related injuries, they are prohibited from collecting their full military retired pay and their VA disability compensation at the same time.
Which is just crazy to me.
They face what is called a statutory offset. Essentially, their earned retirement pay is reduced dollar for dollar by the amount of their VA disability pay.
The logic there is just completely broken. I mean, you earn your military pension through your years of service. You're awarded disability compensation because the military physically broke your body in a combat zone.
Right.
Those are two completely distinct ledgers. How did the government ever justify using the compensation for a lost limb to cancel out a retirement pension?
It is incredibly difficult to justify, which is why it's universally despised by veteran advocates. It basically functions as a financial penalty for getting wounded in combat.
Wow.
But the Major Richard Starr Act would completely eliminate that offset for these Chapter 61 combat retirees. They would finally receive their full earned military retirement pay and their full VA disability compensation concurrently.
That is hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime restored to families who have already sacrificed immensely.
Absolutely.
And speaking of immense sacrifice, we also have to talk about the highest levels of the Special Monthly Compensation, or SMC, schedules. Because this bill adds a specific $10,000 monthly compensation to the R1, R2, and T schedules.
Yeah, and we should detail what life looks like for a veteran in those specific categories.
Please do.
The R1, R2, and T schedules represent the absolute highest echelon of disability recognized by the VA.
Right.
Veterans in these categories have suffered catastrophic, life-altering injuries. We are talking about severe spinal cord injuries resulting in quadriplegia or devastating traumatic brain injuries where the veteran requires around-the-clock, skilled medical care just to survive daily life.
And in most of those cases, a spouse or a family member has had to completely abandon their own career to become a full-time caregiver.
Exactly. The financial devastation is total. So the $10,000 addition to these specific SMC schedules, it recognizes the extraordinary compounding cost of that ongoing care.
It ensures that those who sacrifice the most physically and the families who carry them aren't driven into bankruptcy by the sheer cost of keeping their loved one alive at home.
It's really about dignity for the most severely wounded.
Yeah. Now let's pivot from the severity of injuries to the actual administrative battlefield of getting those injuries recognized. Because this legislation takes a very aggressive swing at reforming the claims process itself.
It does.
And there is one procedural safeguard in here that absolutely blew my mind. This bill bars the VA from denying a claim solely because a veteran missed a C&P, a compensation and pension exam.
This is a massive shift in how the VA operates because currently, if you miss a scheduled C&P exam, the VA has the authority to issue a reflex denial based on that absence alone, completely closing out the claim.
Hold on, let me get this straight.
Yeah.
You're telling me that right now, if you have mountains of medical evidence service, treatment records, independent doctor's notes, DBQs, and you miss one single administrative exam.
Yep.
Perhaps because the notification went to your spam folder or a contractor botched the scheduling, the VA can just nuke the entire claim. The clock resets to zero.
That is exactly what happens. And honestly, it happens every single day. Administrative errors, lost mail, or miscommunications with third-party contractors result in missed appointments, and the veteran pays the price.
By having to start the agonizing appeals process from scratch.
Exactly. But this bill mandates that if an exam is missed, the VA cannot just issue a blanket denial. They are legally required to review the file and make a decision based on the evidence already on the record.
Oh, wow.
If your medical files clearly establish the diagnosis and the service connection, a missed clerical appointment can no longer torpedo your benefits.
That is just basic common sense returning to the system. And we see another push for structural common sense when it comes to military sexual trauma or MST claims.
Right.
The Act mandates that MST claims must be routed to specialized processors, and it creates a public dashboard for oversight. But my question is this. Why does it take a literal act of Congress, a statutory law, to force the VA to use specialized processors for something as highly sensitive as sexual trauma?
Well,
Like, why wasn't that just an internal policy memo?
it really speaks to the immense inertia of large bureaucracies. Sometimes logical internal policy just isn't enough to overcome systemic friction. Processing an MST claim requires a trauma-informed approach,
Definitely.
The evidence gathering is incredibly complex. It often relies on behavioral markers rather than standard medical records, and a poorly trained reviewer can easily re-traumatize the survivor.
Which is horrific.
Right. And without a statutory mandate, a law passed by Congress, bureaucracies can be incredibly slow to restructure their workforce, allocate the training funds, and build dedicated processing centers.
So by putting this into law, it removes the VA's option to deprioritize it.
Exactly. And that public dashboard is vital because, well, sunlight is the best disinfectant. It ensures there is permanent, visible accountability for the backlog.
You can't manage what you don't measure. And we see that same necessary push to modernize infrastructure when we look at the provisions focused specifically on women veterans.
Yes, the simple fact is that for decades, the physical and medical infrastructure of the VA was designed almost exclusively around a male veteran population.
Right.
This act includes very specific, practical requirements to force the system to catch up to the reality of today's military.
Like what?
Well, it mandates that every single VA medical center must construct private, accessible lactation spaces. It also requires the VA to formally evaluate the massive gaps in medical research regarding menopause and midlife health for women veterans.
Which is a critical blind spot, considering the military historically based its physiological aging and performance studies almost entirely on male bodies.
Exactly.
It's about ensuring the medical research actually reflects the veteran sitting in the exam room. And that commitment to recognizing the full scope of the military community brings us to the final major pillar of this act, the families.
The Love Lives On Act.
Yes, the Love Lives On Act is folded into this package, and it targets something known as the widow's penalty. Explain the age 55 rule for us.
Currently, if a surviving spouse receives dependency and indemnity compensation, which is known as DIC, or the Survivor Benefit Plan, SBP, they lose those benefits entirely if they choose to remarry before they reach the age of 55.
It's just an incredibly punitive rule.
It really is.
You lose your spouse to a service-connected disease or combat injury. You endure that grief. You finally begin to rebuild your life. Perhaps you find love again at age 50, and the government forces you to make a choice.
Yeah.
Marry the person you love, or keep the financial lifeline you rely on to survive. Removing that age 55 penalty restores basic human dignity to military widows and widowers.
It stops financially penalizing them for moving forward. And the Love Lives On Act doesn't just remove penalties, it actively enhances support.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it restores TRICARE healthcare eligibility for surviving spouses who remarry. It also includes a highly targeted financial boost to the DIC payments themselves. It raises the DIC baseline by 3% over the standard annual cost of living adjustment, or KLA, for a period of 3 years.
Okay, let's do the math on that compounding value so the impact is clear. If the standard federal COLA increase for the year is set at 5% based on inflation, DIC recipients would actually see an 8% increase that year.
Exactly.
Over 3 years, that compounding growth significantly raises the baseline standard of living for a surviving family, lifting many out of near-poverty conditions.
It is a mathematical correction to years of stagnant survivor benefits. And there is one more very specific, deeply compassionate carve-out in this section regarding ALS survivors and the 8-year rule.
Right, the tragedy of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis.
Yes. Normally, for a surviving spouse to receive the full DIC kicker, which is an extra monthly stipend, the veteran must have been rated totally disabled for a minimum of 8 continuous years prior to passing away.
But ALS is uniquely aggressive.
It's a uniquely aggressive, service-connected neurodegenerative disease. It is tragically fast. It often takes a veteran's life within 2 to 5 years of diagnosis,
making that 8-year requirement a mathematical impossibility for the family.
Exactly. So this legislation ensures that surviving spouses of veterans who pass away from ALS will receive that full DIC kicker automatically, completely bypassing the 8-year rule.
It recognizes the brutal medical reality of the disease and ensures those families aren't punished by a bureaucratic timeline they had absolutely no control over.
Yeah, it's so important.
When you step back and look at the sheer density of the Take Care of America's Veterans Act, it really is a masterclass in legislative engineering. They identified a massive impending loss, the billions about to evaporate from the budget, and designed a vehicle to capture it and deploy it across the entire spectrum of veteran life.
It really addresses the administrative, the medical, and the financial hurdles all at once.
So let's bring this all together and recap the top 3 key takeaways for you today. I'll take the first one. Number 1, VA rating changes for conditions like sleep apnea and tinnitus are coming, driven by medical modernization, and they are going to inevitably redirect tens of billions of dollars out of the veteran care budget.
And number two, the Take Care of America's Veterans Act is an urgent, unified effort by 23 major VSOs to legally capture those billions up front, ensuring that money stays permanently earmarked for veterans.
Right. And number three, if passed, this bill uses those exact funds to implement sweeping, highly practical upgrades. It forces the VA to evaluate evidence instead of denying claims over missed C&P exams. It abolishes the unjust combat pay offset for injured retirees. It funds critical invisible wound research, and it radically boosts benefits for surviving families.
So much impact in one bill.
Truly. So for your practical action today, we highly recommend you take a few minutes to look up the Take Care of America's Veterans Act. The American Legion has a great, easy-to-read one-pager available online.
Yeah, definitely look through it and identify which of these 60-plus provisions directly impact your current claims, your health care, or your family's future.
And as always, make sure your medical records and contact information are fully updated with the VA so you are prepared for whatever policy changes come down the pipeline next.
The stakes are incredibly high, and being informed is your best defense against an evolving bureaucracy.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you as well. Let us know in the comments which of these proposed changes would make the biggest difference for you or your family. And please remember to subscribe for more deep dives into your benefits. Thank you for watching Veterans Briefing. Take care, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode.